Some gods were not forgotten because they were weak. They were forgotten because humanity became afraid of what they represented. Every civilization worshipped gods, gods of the sky, sea, harvest, war, love, death, fire, fertility, storms, justice, kingship, and fate. Temples were built for them. Hymns were sung. Sacrifices were offered. Their names were carved into stone and carried through generations. But not all gods survived. Some disappeared when their temples collapsed. Some were buried beneath new religions. Some were renamed, demonized, or transformed into monsters. Some were erased because their civilizations fell. And some were forgotten on purpose. Because gods are never only gods. They are mirrors of what a civilization fears, desires, values, and refuses to face. A god of love reveals how a people understood desire. A god of war reveals how they understood violence. A god of death reveals how they understood mortality. A god of chaos reveals what they feared might destroy the world. So when humanity tries to forget a god, it is often trying to forget a part of itself. Forgotten gods are not simply lost characters from old stories. They are buried symbols. They are memories of older worlds, when nature felt alive. Blood had sacred meaning. Kings feared omens, storms carried divine anger, and darkness was not empty, but full of watching powers. To understand forgotten gods, we must look not only at religion, but at memory itself. Forgetting is never neutral. When a divine name disappears, a culture has changed. A fear has been suppressed. A power has been replaced. A new order has defeated an old one. Sometimes, to build a new world, humanity first has to bury its old gods. In Greek mythology, before Zeus ruled Olympus, there were the Titans. They were older, larger, more primal beings, connected to the first structure of the cosmos. Cronus, Oceanus, Hyperion, Rhea, Themis, Mnemosyne, and others belonged to an age before the Olympians became the familiar rulers of heaven, sea, and underworld. The Titans were not simply villains. They were the old order. Cronus ruled before Zeus. He was a father, a king, and a devourer of his own children. His story reveals one of mythology's oldest fears, that power will consume the future to preserve itself. Cronus hears that one of his children will overthrow him, so he swallows them at birth. This is the fear of every old power. Every empire fears the next generation. Every king fears the heir. Every system fears the child who may grow strong enough to destroy it. Zeus eventually defeats Cronus and the Titans in the Titanomachy. The Olympians rise. The Titans fall. Some are imprisoned in Tartarus, buried beneath the world, beneath memory, beneath the bright mythology of Olympus. This is how forgetting often begins, not by erasing a god completely, but by changing what that god means. A defeated god becomes a monster. An old mother becomes a witch. A spirit of wilderness becomes a demon. A god of the previous age becomes the enemy of the new one. In Babylonian mythology, Tiamat follows this ancient pattern. She is a primordial force of chaos, a mother of gods and monsters, connected to the waters before creation. In the creation myth, the younger god Marduk defeats her, and from her divided body, the ordered world is formed. Tiamat is not merely killed. She becomes the material of creation itself. This is a powerful and disturbing image. The new world is built from the body of the old goddess. Chaos is defeated, but also used. The forgotten god does not vanish. She becomes the hidden foundation of the world. Humanity often tried to forget gods like Tiamat because they represented something too ancient to control. The truth that creation begins in darkness, blood, chaos, and forces older than law. The new gods bring order. But the old gods remind us that order was born from something wild. In Egypt, Set shows another way a god can become difficult to remember. Set was associated with desert, storms, violence, foreignness, disorder, and conflict. He is famous for murdering Osiris and fighting Horus for the throne. In later traditions, he was often treated as a figure of evil and chaos. But Set was not always simply evil. He also protected the sun god Ra during the nightly journey through the underworld. He fought Apophis, the serpent of chaos. This makes him paradoxical, a god of disorder who helps defend cosmic order, a violent god who protects the sun, a dangerous god who is sometimes needed because he is dangerous. Gods like Set are hard for civilizations to keep because they do not fit simple moral categories. They reveal that destruction can sometimes serve protection and that the forces we fear may also defend us from greater darkness. But societies often prefer simpler stories. They want heroes and villains, pure gods and evil demons. Over time, complicated gods become simplified. Set becomes easier to remember as a villain than as a paradox. The gods humanity tries to forget are often the gods that refuse to be simple. They are gods of thresholds, wilderness, sexuality, death, madness, blood, storms, plague, and transformation. They are not comfortable gods. They remind people that life is not clean. Dionysus is one of these gods. Modern culture often remembers him as a god of wine and celebration. But ancient Dionysus was far more dangerous. He represented intoxication, ecstasy, madness, theater, masks, frenzy, and the collapse of ordinary identity. He was a god who dissolved boundaries. Under his influence, the civilized mask fell away. Social order loosened. The hidden animal came forward. Dionysus asked, "What are you when your mask falls away?" This is why gods of madness and ecstasy are so powerful. They reveal that civilization depends on restraint, but the human soul sometimes longs to escape restraint. People want order, but also release. They want identity, but also the dangerous freedom of losing control. A culture can never fully erase a god like Dionysus, because what he represents keeps returning. In festivals, music, crowds, intoxication, performance, rebellion, and every moment when people grow tired of being civilized. Humanity tries to forget such gods because they reveal a disturbing truth. The self is not as stable as we pretend. Gods connected to death were also often feared, misunderstood, or pushed into shadow. Hades, for example, was not evil. He did not create death. He ruled the realm where all mortals eventually went. But because he was associated with the underworld, silence, and mortality, people feared his name. Death gods make humanity uncomfortable because they do not flatter us. They do not promise endless youth. They do not pretend power lasts forever. They stand at the end of every road and wait without anger. Humanity tries to forget death gods because humanity tries to forget death. But forgetting death does not defeat it. It only makes life shallower. Death gods teach proportion. They remind kings that they are temporary, warriors that glory ends, and lovers that time matters because it is limited. A forgotten death god is not gone. He waits in every grave, every ancestor shrine, every funeral song, and every silence after a name is spoken for the last time. Some gods were forgotten because their people were conquered. When a city fell, its gods could fall with it. Temples were destroyed. Priests were killed. Rituals were interrupted. Sacred languages disappeared. This makes forgotten gods deeply tragic. They did not always lose because they were powerless. They lost because their worshippers disappeared, scattered, converted, or were silenced. A god can survive or only if someone survives to remember. There is something haunting about this. A god may once have received offerings from thousands. Kings may have feared their omens. Farmers may have prayed for rain. Mothers may have whispered their name during childbirth. Then centuries pass. The temple becomes ruins. The language dies. The god's face breaks. The name becomes uncertain. At what point does a god die? Is it when the last temple falls? When the last priest is buried? When the last prayer is spoken? Or when the last person who understands the prayer is gone? But some gods do not disappear completely. They return in disguise. A storm god becomes a demon in a new religion. A fertility goddess becomes a fairy queen. A household spirit becomes superstition. A local god becomes a saint, a monster, a legend, or a children's tale. The old divine power is not erased. It is translated. This is one of the strange ways mythology survives. Gods change costumes. They lose temples, but enter folklore. They lose priests, but enter stories. They lose worship, but become symbols. Humanity may try to forget them, but imagination keeps smuggling them back. The forgotten god becomes a ghost inside culture. This is especially true of gods of the wilderness. As civilizations grew, forests, mountains, deserts, and swamps became places of fear. The wild was outside the walls, where law weakened and spirits, animals, exiles, and danger lived. But before civilization tried to control the wild, humanity depended on it. Forests gave food and medicine. Rivers gave life. Mountains touched the sky. Caves held darkness and memory. The old nature gods were not evil. They were powerful because nature itself is powerful. Humanity tried to forget these gods because we wanted to believe we had escaped nature. But we never did. We built cities, but storms still came. We built walls, but disease entered. We built machines, but the earth still shook. The gods of wilderness return whenever civilization remembers that it is not separate from the world it tries to dominate. Some gods were forgotten because they demanded too much: blood, sacrifice, discipline, terror, surrender, transformation. Modern people often prefer gods who comfort, bless, and forgive. But ancient religion was not always comfortable. Many gods were not friends. They were powers. You worshipped them because storms came, crops failed, children died, armies invaded, and plague spread. Religion was not only belief. It was relationship with dangerous sacred power. A forgotten god may represent a forgotten relationship with fear. This is why forgotten gods fascinate us now. We live in a world that believes it has outgrown old fears. We have science, medicine, maps, satellites, and data. We no longer need a storm god to explain thunder or a death goddess to explain disease. But explanation is not the same as mastery. We can explain storms, but we cannot always stop them. We can understand disease, but pandemics still humble us. We can map the ocean, but it still swallows ships. We can study death, but we cannot remove it from life. The old gods may no longer rule our explanations, but they still haunt our emotions. That is why forgotten gods return in art, literature, games, films, and modern spirituality. We do not return to them only because they are exotic. We return because they carry symbols our modern language often lacks: chaos, death, ecstasy, wilderness, fertility, destruction, transformation, and awe. The forgotten gods are not asking us to worship them again. They are asking us to remember what they represented. Because what humanity forgets does not disappear. It moves underground. It becomes myth, nightmare, metaphor, nostalgia, or hunger. The old gods go silent, but the forces behind them remain. Forget the god of death, and death does not vanish. Forget the god of chaos, and chaos still waits. Forget the goddess of the earth, and the earth still responds. Forget the god of madness, and madness still finds a voice. Forget the god of war, and war does not become less human. Maybe humanity tried to forget certain gods not because they were false, but because they were too true. They revealed the parts of existence we wanted to cover with civilization, morality, reason, and progress. They reminded us that life is bloody, desire is dangerous, nature is not tame, power is unstable, death is certain, and the human soul is darker than any law we create. A forgotten god is often a truth we buried because we did not know how to live with it. But buried things do not always stay buried. Broken statues are pulled from the earth. Names carved from temples reappear in books. The old gods begin speaking again, not as rulers of our world, but as mirrors of our hidden selves. The bright gods tell us what humanity wanted to become. The forgotten gods tell us what humanity feared it still was. Every civilization has two pantheons: the gods it proudly worships, and the gods it tries not to remember. The first shows its ideals. The second shows its fears. So when we study forgotten gods, we are not only studying old religion. We are studying the psychology of civilizations. We are asking what people chose to honor, what they chose to hide, and what they tried to bury in the dark. And perhaps the most unsettling truth is this: humanity never truly forgets its gods. It only changes their names. The old god of chaos becomes disorder. The old god of death becomes anxiety. The old god of war becomes ideology. The old goddess of earth becomes ecological crisis. The old god of madness becomes the breakdown of the self. The old god of the wild becomes the nature we tried to dominate, and now fear losing forever. The gods return because the forces they represented never left. Maybe the question is not why humanity forgot them. Maybe the question is why they are coming back. Thank you for watching this journey into the gods humanity tried to forget and the ancient powers that still haunt our imagination. If you enjoyed this video, Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about forgotten gods, dark mythology, ancient fears, and the hidden truths that continue to shape the human world today.